but we're going to get started with the formal program. So thank you for joining us. This is episode 4 of this year's Teaching with Tinkercad webinar series. Our theme for tonight is teaching the A in STEAM. And we are so excited to have Dr. Nettrice Gaskins here with us tonight, who's going to help us get things steamy and talk about her experience as both an artist and a maker educator and many other things. So we are so excited you're here with us tonight. It's also Tinkercad's 10th birthday week. So this is a very special occasion for us, and we are so grateful and thankful for all of your spirit this week. And we're going to talk a little bit more about just some of the ways that you can participate in Tinkercad's 10th birthday week. Tomorrow, I think, is the official day. My name is Kellyanne Mahoney, and I'm a youth program specialist at Autodesk. We are also joined tonight by Jenny Fennell. Jenny, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Fennell, Content Development Manager for Youth Education.
Thank you, Jenny. And Jenny is also here to help keep you engaged throughout the episode. So please continue to chat with us, chat with each other in the chat. And also, if you have questions that you want us to bring up at the end in the question and answer, please send them to Jenny in the question and answer. It's easier for her to see them as well. And we'll also be asking you questions throughout the episode so that we can kind of bring your voices into the mix the best we can. So do please connect with us on Twitter at Tinkercad and Instructables. And also, again, this is Tinkercad's 10th birthday week. So you can also connect with us by using the hashtag Tinkercad10. We are delighted also to have Dr. Nettrice Gaskins join us for this episode. Dr. Nettrice is the Assistant Director for Leslie STEAM at the Leslie STEAM Learning Lab at Leslie University. So these are different ways that you can connect with Nettrice. Nettrice is a computational artist who paints with algorithms. She's a maker, she's an educator, she's a maker educator. She also taught computer science, AP computer science through the lens of art as a teacher in the Boston Public Schools before she joined Leslie. Nettrice is also an author. So this is her book that's going to be coming out in August, which is being published by the MIT Press. It's called Techno Vernacular Creativity and Innovation. So we are super excited for Dr. Nettrice Gaskins to be with us tonight. And she's going to be sharing her story and some fun projects that she's done with students with us tonight. Please do stick around at the end for our question and answer. The Tinkercad team and the Autodesk Education team is all here to answer your questions. And I'm very excited to also announce a new addition to the cast of characters tonight, who is Daria Zhao, who manages marketing for youth for Autodesk. So we are excited for Daria to join us tonight too. We do have goals this evening. One of our goals is for you to be able to use Tinkercad as a creativity tool to align lessons with ISTE standards, National Core Art standards, and even state standards. For example, we are going to share a project with you of Nettrice's in which she has represented themes of joy from literature using Tinkercad. And also just thinking about different ways that you can combine math and art. So experimenting with properties of rotations, reflections, and translations. We also hope that you'll be able to use Tinkercad to engage students in culturally relevant learning that promotes collaboration, community, and self-exploration. And we also hope that you'll be able to ask questions to the Tinkercad team. So our plan for tonight is we're going to begin with some general knowledge about Tinkercad. I'm going to do a very quick Tinkercad demonstration. It's particularly for those who are new to Tinkercad. Tonight, we welcome you. And then we're going to hear from Nettrice, and Nettrice is going to talk about how she promotes community collaboration, self-exploration, even self-determination with students through her work with Tinkercad and her creative projects that she shares with students. She's also going to share with us specifically some resources that she's created for you to use with students that she uses herself. And lastly, we're going to do our question and answer. So just to begin with some general knowledge about Tinkercad. So in Tinkercad, and by sharing Tinkercad with your students can make small things. They can design cars. They can design big things. They can, play with architectural concepts. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight through the context of a lesson plan. They could think about infrastructure like bridges and think about even use computational thinking to design a bridge. And last but not least, Tinkercad is a great vehicle for students to be able to express themselves using STEM and even to see themselves in STEM and STEAM, which is what we're talking about tonight. So Tinkercad is part of the Autodesk family. So Autodesk makes software for people who make things. So if you've ever driven in a high performance vehicle before, or have thought about buying an electric car, or if you've ever marveled at a skyscraper or the infrastructure of a bridge, or delighted in the computer graphics of a blockbuster film or video game, chances are you've engaged with something that one of our customers has designed or made. And one of the reasons I share that with you is because as an educator and also as a student, you're able to access about 100 of our professional tools for free. So you'll be sent this slideshow after this webinar tonight in an email, and you'll be able to actually access the link to learn more about this. But Tinkercad is free for everyone. It is an entry-level 3D design and creativity tool. It works very well on Chromebooks, on iPads. Even in using iPads, you or your students can unleash their designs in real life through augmented reality, which is a fun feature using the iPad app. Tinkercad has 3 environments. So there's the 3D editor, there's a circuits editor, and there's a code blocks editor. This is the 4th episode of this webinar series, and we have actually explored all 3 of these environments. So if you haven't yet already, please do check out some of our earlier episodes on code blocks and circuits. Just basically, this is the 3D editor, which is where a lot of people, both young adults and young people and children, get started. And all you're doing is dragging and dropping shapes onto the work plane, combining shapes, as you can see here, turning those shapes, solid shapes, into holes, subtracting from those shapes. And if you want to, eventually you can make it an STL file and 3D print it. Or not. So one of the lessons that we wanted to share with you tonight, kind of on this topic of putting the A in STEAM, is one of our Tinkercad lesson plans on playground design. But as you can see here in our lesson plans that you can find on the Teach page in Tinkercad, basically all of the lessons are great ways for you to explore STEAM. So putting the art in science, technology, engineering, and math. So all of these lessons have objectives and standards that are aligned with them. And that's how you can find this playground lesson. This playground lesson in particular is aligned with standards that you're probably familiar with. So there's some ISTE standards it's aligned with, some next-gen science and engineering standards, and also some math Common Core standards. All of the lessons also have objectives that are connected to those standards. So for example, one of them in this particular lesson about designing an inclusive play space is to analyze and evaluate a design for features that make it inclusive play. So you can see here there are infographics in the lesson. This is one that was actually adapted from the Boston Children's Museum, and it's kind of their framework for making sure that all of the experiences and exhibits that they design at the Children's Museum are inclusive. They also use this framework to actually design a playground that's built next door to the Boston Children's Museum, and you can see how it's color-coded to align with these different features of inclusive play. Within the lesson, there's also a Tinkercad model of a playground, and students can use this as a way to analyze and evaluate the design, to think of ways that they can improve upon it to make it more inclusive. You can also, through this lesson, have students think about spatial relationships and really kind of build upon their spatial reasoning. And even think like architects, for example, making a bubble diagram of the playground in which maybe your students are working together in a small group to lay out all the different equipment that would be part of the play space. And then later on, each student might choose a particular play structure and then make an isometric drawing of that play structure. Another objective of this lesson is for students to really think about the concept of placemaking, which is another concept from architecture and urban planning. So really thinking about making their design site specific and really thinking about who the end users are of their design. They might do this through accessing, Google Maps or Bing Maps or other publicly accessible information. Depending on the age of your students, they can, research census data, for example, and really come away with, some thoughts on the safety, the comfort, and how they're able to promote joy through the space that they're making. I would say across most of the lessons, this is another common objective, which is to develop a visual literacy and a vocabulary to express your ideas as a designer. So one of the vocabulary words that we explore in this inclusive place-based lesson is the concept of modularity. So you might have students think about, like, why is modularity a strategy that a lot of designers use? Design thinking is also a common theme throughout all the lesson plans. So depending on the ages of your students, you might have your students, actually do like research on the census data around the site that they choose for their play space. You could easily adapt this lesson for elementary school students and even have them visit a play space, a physical play space, and evaluate it. It's nice to bring kids outside during these times as well. You might even have students interview each other, in evaluating the play space to think about how it could be more inclusive for others. You could even have students make a persona map and really, think about that journey for the end user. Mental origami is something that you might also employ through this lesson. So this is an example from Dr. Nettrice Gaskins, who is a master of mental origami. So what I mean by that is taking, maybe one interesting shape from their 3D design and kind of reverse engineering it, like thinking about, if I were to fabricate this, not with a 3D printer, but maybe I only was constrained to a 2-dimensional plane. For example, if I wanted to make this shape using plywood, how would I take this 3D shape and turn it into a 2D shape? Could even be fun to do something like make this shape in with a die cutter machine and paper, or with a Cricut, for example. And I think that Tinkercad is also a really great tool for teaching students about measurement. So thinking about physical scale. There's also a ruler tool within Tinkercad. I'm sure that Donald and Matthew have the link to that fun ruler tool Tinkercad blog post that you could share in the chat. So in thinking about, taking their digital model and constructing it in a physical prototype in some way, there are features actually within Tinkercad. For example, there's the Making at Home collection, where you can bring in things that you might find around the house, like recyclables, for example, tissue rolls, and really kind of think about digitally, how can you think about scale, because these actually, when you bring in the toothpick or the pencil, are actually the same size as they are in real life. You might have students just kind of like eyeball it and just start to think about, look at their digital design and what do they have around their house that they could use to build it in real life. Again, thinking about features within Tinkercad that you can teach measurement. There's the ruler tool that I have a circle around in the upper right-hand corner. You can drag that out onto the work plane and really get precise measurements about each part of the design. There's also the grid that you can edit in the lower right, and you can even kind of change the precision with which you are designing in Tinkercad using the snap grid. If you choose to edit the grid in Tinkercad, it's preset for it to be in millimeters, but you can actually change the increments of measurement that you're using within Tinkercad. So you could change it to inches, to millimeters, even to bricks. And what does that mean? So one of the fun features within Tinkercad that I think a lot of people don't realize exist is you can take your design in Tinkercad and you can automatically transform it into bricks. So thinking about like familiar plastic bricks that you might have around your house, you do that by clicking that brick icon in the upper right-hand corner. From there, you can have students really start to think about like quantifying, the materials in their design, which is actually a really important skill in the construction industry. This is actually the real proportions of the familiar plastic bricks that you might find around your house. So they're a little bit taller than they are wide. And you might think about like, well, if the brick is, 1.2 feet tall, how big would a stack of 2 bricks be? So, maybe it would be 4 feet 10 inches, which is the standard size, I feel like, for a lot of middle school students, and even some vertically challenged youth program specialists at Autodesk. So once students have thought about the size of a human as compared to their design, they might actually really start to see themselves in it and imagine it and really think about, are these proportions right? Within Tinkercad, you can also refine the bricks, and you can see that on the upper left-hand corner. You can also build your design and see it built layer by layer, and you can see that button at the top where you can build from the ground all the way up in layers. And again, another really fun way to quantify the materials that you would need in your design. Could be even really fun to say to students, this is your budget of materials, so you can only use so many bricks in your design. When students are exploring the design thinking process, a common phase in that process is the refine phase. So you might have students, once they have their design in mind, you might share with them some, safety rules around safety in playground design. I took these actually from a federal handbook on playground safety. So they are real, federal regulations. So students might refine their design to maybe make the edges rounded, or they might think about the openings between monkey bars or stairs or steps or railings, and think about, is it, wide enough? Do we need to change it so that someone doesn't get their head stuck in it, for example? And then lastly, just, in thinking about using Tinkercad and introducing your students to Tinkercad, 3D printer is not required. There are many fun ways for students to be able to find value in their digital designs. So this is just one example of me just taking this playground design and bringing it out in my yard with my iPad and taking a picture of it. This is another really fun example from another one of our favorite Tinkercad teachers, Mr. Rob Morrill, who is a STEAM director in California. He's also a middle school teacher. And this is just another example of how, he's thought of ways that students could design innovative play spaces.
Here I'm using Tinkercad's iPad app and the built-in augmented reality viewer to view a parklet I created. A parklet is a mini park, and this one is built to scale to cover 2 parking spaces. And it has various features like solar-powered lights, a rainwater collection system for the plants, seating, play features for kids. You can imagine students designing these to achieve all kinds of purposes. I can try out the parklet in different locations with the AR viewer. Some parklets are less imaginative and useful than others. And here I've been able to literally replace one parklet with my own creation. Students can use design thinking to make a parklet to serve certain users, and they can incorporate art, engineering, and culture. And with augmented reality, they can really visualize the impact of their creations.
So that was a really inspirational idea from Mr. Morrill, and you can find more inspirational ideas from Rob Morrill at his website that you can see at the bottom, robmorrill.com. And he also has a really useful YouTube playlist that actually has really great tips too for teachers who are just starting out in Tinkercad. So we thank Mr. Morrill for sharing that video with us.
Here.
So at this point, we just wanted to stop and hear from you. So we've talked a lot about standards, and we're wondering what is the role of standards in your teaching, particularly what standards do you typically use? So do you use ISTE standards? Do you use your state standards, Common Core? There's the Next Gen Science standards. Please let us know. I know standards is a really fun generative topic. Jenny, do we have any answers in the responses in the chat?
Not seeing any quite yet. Oh, TEKS.
TEKS.
ISTE Blueprint Standard. That's what we've got so far. Texas TEKS.
Nice.
Project Lead the Way standards.
Interesting to know also internationally. We do have some international teachers tonight. What are the standards that you use? I know sometimes we can be very United States centric in the way that we talk about standards.
SCSC, Next Generation Science, Nevada Academic Computer Science and Integrated Technology Standards, Next Generation, New Zealand curriculum.
Nice. Well, keep letting us know about standards in the chat. I'm sure you would love to talk about standards all night with your fellow colleagues, so please do so in the chat. So next, I'm just going to do a quick demonstration of Tinkercad, and then we're going to get into Nettrice's presentation. So I thought tonight that it would be fun to do a presentation on how to make those kind of, you could see those modular play cubes that were inspired by the Design Museum's play cubes. So what you see me doing here, just to start, is I'm grabbing a cube and then a pyramid. You'll see me doing this a lot. I'm kind of obsessed with using work planes. So I'm dragging out that kind of orange work plane underneath because I want to make sure that my shapes that I'm trying to put together are actually attaching to the surfaces of the other shapes. So you see me quickly drawing a square around my design, and then I am using the align tool. You'll see me do that multiple times. So next I'm doing Command D or Control D, which is a shortcut to duplicate your shape. And then I'm using the rotate tool to rotate it. I'm doing that again, so Command D, making a different color so you can see it. And look how quickly you can see that I've made a dodecahedron. Don't worry, it is not a demonic platonic solid. It's actually an irregular dodecahedron. So it's made with diamond shapes, not pentagon shapes. So next you see me, I'm lifting it up over the work plane. I duplicated it and made a hole inside of it because I want to hollow out that shape. And then I'm using the align tool again. And then I am grouping it together. So next I want to put those holes and thinking about like fun holes that kids can maybe climb through and play in. I'm switched to orthogonal view so that I can kind of align my shapes a little bit better. So that's kind of a more 2D way of viewing. I'll shift back to perspective view later. I'm just using the arrow keys to kind of move the cylinder that I've placed there around to try to center it to the best of my ability. And you can see me playing with the snap grid and changing the precision of the way that I'm moving. And I'm using the camera controls a lot. So zooming in and zooming out, I'm stretching the shape to make it super tall. And then I'm dipping it down that Z axis using the black arrowhead at the top. So then I just duplicate it again. So Command D or Control D, and then I'm rotating it around. And I'm viewing it using the view cube there, using the work plane again to put my shape on top of the other shape. And again, you just like pushing and pulling those handles along the side to manipulate the size of the shape. I'm zooming in, trying to center it, zooming out, stretching it out really tall using those handles, and then dipping it again down the Z axis using that arrow. I'm gonna duplicate it again, so Command D or Control D. And then once I have that duplicate shape, you see that I am making it so that the holes are on the other side. I'm grouping it together, and then voila, you see that I have this shape. So this is a little bit advanced, but we do have some slower tutorials within the lesson as well. So this is also from the play space lesson. So before we move into Nettrice's presentation, we have another question for you. You can answer it in the question and answer. So our question is, how are math and art connected? So we hope that you thought about that a little bit during this presentation tonight. And I know that you're going to think even more deeply about it once you hear from Dr. Nettrice tonight. This is kind of a deep thoughts question, so we'll give you a moment to think about it. Anything yet, Jenny?
I'm not seeing anything quite yet.
Well, maybe we can keep this conversation going in the question and answer, and teachers can continue to think about it as Nettrice is talking, because I can't wait to hear Nettrice's presentation.
We do have a couple coming in now. The study of patterns, art makes math visual, nature is full of geometric shapes. And the key is getting students to realize that by experiencing it, linear perspective, measurement.
Nice. So these are all ideas that it's almost like you read Nettrice's mind, because Dr. Nettrice is going to be talking about some of the things. Particularly, I know Nettrice really likes to think about patterns. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dr. Nettrice Gaskins. And Nettrice is going to talk to us a little bit about how she's come up with these cool projects that promote community, collaboration, self-exploration, and I would even say self-determination in students. So Nettrice, take it away.
Hello. I don't know if it's morning, afternoon, or night, but I'm good all of those. And so I'm going to talk about an Instructable that I recently created, and we actually at Leslie STEAM did a workshop at South by Southwest around, and it was around quilt codes, in this case, Underground Railroad quilts. Really into quilts, into textiles in general. And there's a historical, even a civil rights history for quilts, especially in the South. So the Freedom quilts on the left, and then on the right is a more recent one I picked up from the Smithsonian magazine of showing you symbols in the quilts. And so that was an inspiration. And one of the teachers actually was a librarian in Somerville, I believe, who was doing an activity for Black History Month around quilts, and that inspired this Instructable. Next slide, please. So the idea of creating symbols and then bringing that into and creating a three-dimensional quilt in Tinkercad started here by creating scalable vector graphics. So I used a program that's open source called Inkscape to create the graphics. And so you can see here, this is just on the left is one of the images on the Instructable, and it's linked in the chat. And then I imported, after I did trace bitmap in Inkscape, and then brought that SVG, saved it as an SVG, and brought the file imported it into Tinkercad. And so you can see that that's what it looks like. You choose a file. If it's too large, it'll tell you file size up to 25 megabytes. But this is a small image. And then on the Instructable, you have 4 of these symbols to start with. If I said 5, but 4. And Inkscape is free. So it's an open source program you can download. And so I brought those each into the work plane in Tinkercad. And next slide. And then I used transformational geometry, so translation, rotation, and dilation in Tinkercad. So on the left, you have an example of a possible 3D quilt with the symbols. And then on the right, I'm using the rotation, all that stuff from the geometry, and dilation through extrusion in Tinkercad. So using that to create the quilt. Next slide, please. And there's another aspect of the Instructable that I was really happy to try out at South by Southwest with teachers, and that was using Tinkercad's Collaborate feature. And so I was inspired by, in hip hop culture, there's something called a cipher, and you can see there's actually some information on the Instructable about it. So on the left is a cipher in a lab I used to manage at Boston Arts Academy. The kids actually chose that space, the maker space, to do the cipher every Wednesday during lunch. This was their club, so to speak. And so there's some, it's a kinship building activity. There's ground rules there's always in a circle. There's each person gets a chance to perform. You don't have to perform, you can just be there and spectate. But this is just a kind of, there's no hierarchy. The experts are on the same level as the beginners. There are a lot of different aspects of this activity. And this is something that was passed down over generations in hip hop culture. And here it's happening. And at some point we started to add other maker type of stuff to the cipher, but that's the book. This is the photo. So I thought about, what if we did a cipher in Tinkercad using the Collaborate feature? And so we tried this out, same rules or same idea, the cipher in hip hop, but using Tinkercad. Next slide. So the teachers, this is what they came up with. So this is the Tinkercad cipher. We had 5 different groups. and they were all teachers in K-12, and they all came up with different ideas about what the quilt could be. So the one on the left, you have them, some people use the symbols from the Instructable, and others created their own sort of blocks and for the quilt. And then they used the scribble feature to create as well. So they did a mixture of stuff. Each person had a chance, or each teacher had a chance to create and add to their particular quilt. On the right, they went on the Z scale. So they went in the Z axis, and you can see that they actually did it almost like on different levels. So there's a B, there's a, and they didn't stay on the plane, the work plane. They actually used the space around it as part of the quilt for their idea. Different shapes. So it's really each version, breakout group and Tinkercad Cipher had a different type, a different approach to creating their 3D quilt. Next slide, please. And so, so that you can look at that, and there's information about all that in the Instructable. And so I will say that some of the things from the book, it's called Techno Vernacular Creativity. It's sort of 3 modes of practices, and one is remixing. You're remixing existing, in this case, blocks or existing symbols. There's also improvisation. You're doing that spontaneously. And that it also is you're repurposing. So when you repurpose something or reappropriate something, you're taking something that exists and you're adding your own flair to it. Or you're remixing it and you're having objects that you can mix around, sort of that was happening in Tinkercad too. And then of course they're doing this spontaneously, also responding to each other. So somebody may put something in one position and then somebody comes in and sees that and responds to what they've done in the space. So I really like that they can play around with the tool and do that in a way that is inclusive. Also, it's a way to create and foster collaboration and participation. And it's also, there's a cultural connection as well. We can reshare the name shortly. I'll do that. So in addition, so the previous year, I worked at the Autodesk Tech Center, and that's in Boston. And I worked with a group called Math Talk, which is based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they create kind of fun math types of things that are put into playgrounds or parks or out in communities. And so my goal was to take this idea of an abacus and create a sculpture with it. So I started in Tinkercad, as you can see on the left, and it had this idea of taking, similar to what Kellyanne demonstrated, shapes that were kind of cut off, and I wanted them to have different thicknesses and different shapes that appear when you kind of cut it apart, when you cut into it. So, and then through the rods that go through there would have these beads. There were also different simple shapes. And we decided that we would have 3 cases. The first case would be for smaller kids who, couldn't reach, and there would be 1 row. Then as they get older, they do more math. They need to do more computation. It would have 2 rows and of beads, and then 3 rows of beads. On the right is the actual abacus in the playground in Cambridge. This is at Fletcher Maynard Academy. And you can see it's made up of a base, and it's made up of a stainless steel design on the base, and the cases, and this is the first prototype, and the rods, and with the beads on them. Next slide. So a lot went into making that. So I had to learn how to weld. So that's me welding. I had to learn how to use the water jet and to cut out the base. So you can see that happening. It took about 2 hours. That's water cutting the metal. Takes a while. And then I used a 5.5 foot, I feel like it's 5 foot 3D printer to make the cases. And so you can see that happening there, very big 3D printer happening. And then on the lower right, you see the kids actually interacting and using the abacuses, the giant abacus, and as part of the Math Talk project. Next slide.
Well, thank you, Nettrice, for getting our minds all steamy and thinking about not just STEAM and not just integrating arts into STEM, but also helping students see themselves in STEM and STEAM. We're going to be hearing from Nettrice in a moment too about some of those Instructables, so those instructional resources that she's created to share with you as well. But in the meantime, please let us know in the chat, how do you help students see themselves in STEAM or in STEM? I know that sometimes the words are used interchangeably. Some people say the arts is always part of the other parts of STEM. Jenny, do we have any responses?
Not quite yet.
I think people are thinking.
Yeah,
People are typing.
keep thinking about it. But maybe we'll move on to Nettrice talking about some of her Instructables in more detail, and that will, help you get your minds warmed up in the chat. So next, we're just going to talk a little bit about some instructional resources. So Nettrice, do you want to talk a little bit more in depth about the Tinkercad quilt?
This is the Instructable. So this and the other Instructables made for Leslie's team. The challenge was, here we are about to enter lockdown. So let's create culturally relevant, culturally responsive STEAM related Instructables that people can follow if they're at home, specifically if they're home, and also if they are, they have very little resources. They don't always have the same things we have in a classroom. So this would be one of those. And what's great about this one is someone actually did make it. And so they are responding at the bottom of the Instructable what they did. Some people were saying to use Google Drawings. The problem is coming out with an SVG from there without doing some sort of something to it. Coming into Tinkercad was problematic. So they used, she put a comment in there that they, because I actually know who this is. So I had figured it out because they're from Twitter. Used something called, it's in somewhere in the, I don't know if you can scroll a little bit. Convertio. That's what they use, a tool to convert the SVG so it would work better in Tinkercad. So that's something I hadn't used, and they were just saying, we did this is what we did. This is what we had time for, and then we used this Convertio program to convert the SVGs, so because they were coming in a little wonky from Google Drawings. Google Drawings is an option. You can save those symbols as SVG files, but they do come in kind of weird. So Inkscape so far has been better, even from Adobe Illustrator. Inkscape has been better for me. So when I do this type of project, that's what I use.
And I know how responsive, Nettrice, you are in your comments on your Instructables as well. So we're going to show you next also how you can find. So this is where you can find Nettrice's Instructables. So Nettrice, do you want to talk through some of these as well?
There's a mixture of sort of variety of things, some of it touching on science and chemistry, some relating to, there's a pixel art one. The Sonification one was something that was a challenge from the Math Center at Leslie. Can I take the US Census information and create a STEAMy project with it? So what I did is I found the ability to use spreadsheets and then take the data from spreadsheets and sonify it by bringing it into a program called Two-Tone. It's also free and online to make music from the data. So I started making music from all kinds of spreadsheets, from Pokemon spreadsheet stuff to the US Census to lionfish data from Florida. And how does that sound? And so there's a project there. I did pixel art. So the Sound of Data Science is that one. And then I did some music visualization of the data and brought that into Tinkercad and made designs in Tinkercad from sound waves. So there's a joy one in there. So related to the beginning where we talk about joy, using literature that gets to joy, and using Tinkercad and then 3D printing at the end of that. And that was also a workshop we had done. So that's another Instructable that we made. Again, really to help teachers think of ways to engage students remotely and also in the classroom if they want during the lockdown. And that's an original Sonification project. That's the making sense of the data, introducing students to data science. That's the sound program, looking at sound waves in Tinkercad and really exploring that. So really and a lot of it's culturally relevant, but it's definitely based on art, visuals, and also dance and music.
Nettrice, I love how you think of all different ways, different access points to get kids excited about what you're teaching, particularly when you're at Boston Arts Academy, ways of, combining like dance and physics and, just thinking about how you can take what students are really interested in and then use that as an entry point or an access point to get them to think about, other things that they might be interested in, particularly in STEM. So thank you, Nettrice, and Nettrice is going to be with us for the question and answer. But next, I just wanted to share with you too, as part of our Tinkercad 10th birthday celebration week, Donald from the Tinkercad blog and the Instructables team has pulled together our 10 years of the most fun Instructables that are related to Tinkercad. So this is a collection that you can access through the link in the slideshow. So before we move on to the question and answer, I'm going to be sharing some more resources for you, some events to look out for, and also just some information for follow-up for this webinar. But before we do so, you saw Tinkercad Nettrice, Dr. Nettrice shared her Instructables related to Tinkercad with you. Raise your hand if you have ever used Instructables as a teaching resource. So this is something we're really curious about. In terms of even like using it also as a resource, maybe students are making Instructables depending on their ages as well. So Jenny, before we move on to the next section, do you have a calculation about how many % of teachers use Instructables as a teaching resource? Or
I'd say about 20%.
Nice. Well, we hope that Nettrice's collection of Instructables has inspired you to think about maybe using them as a resource in the future. Jenny, before we move on, was there anything interesting in response to the other questions in the chat?
We did have a comment about regarding students seeing themselves in STEAM, and then the suggestion was have visits from STEAM professionals and have a student host them. I thought that was an interesting.
It's a really good idea. And even in these times, a lot of teachers, are still distance teaching in many ways, but that does provide a silver lining or an opportunity to find speakers, from other places as well to join your classroom.
Mm-hmm.
We are not confined by the constricts of geography in these times.
Right.
Just really quickly, Instructables is a website. And so you just go there and you can actually set up an account and it's free. It's totally, you can make it Instructable as many as you want. If you sometimes you can get featured and they'll show up on the homepage, but there's an active teaching community and a whole teaching area on the Instructables website, because it's a really big archive of how-tos.
Thank you, Dr. Nettrice. Dr. Nettrice is a power user of Instructables, and I think some of her Instructables may have been featured in the past as well. So again, we also just want you to keep the party going and celebrating 10 years of Tinkercad. So you may have seen, over Tinkercad's Twitter account or through the Tinkercad blog that we have been sharing out stories from the Tinkercad community. So Tinker Stars, whose stories about how they started in Tinkercad and where they are now. We also encourage you, it's not too late to give Tinkercad a digital gift in the form of making a cake or a cupcake or some other way of celebrating Tinkercad. You can share your designs by making them public in the gallery. And if you tag them hashtag Tinkercad10, we'll be able to see them and be able to display them as well. So please keep it going, keep the party going. It's not too late. So I'm going to get into my party hat now. Daria, I think you had some questions to ask through polls. So take it away, Daria.
Yes. So if everyone can just hang on as I launch the poll. This is the first time we're launching a poll during the Tinkercad teacher series. So please bear with me. Perfect. We're seeing some responses rolling in, so we know the polling feature is working. Kellyanne, I love the hat. That was also an Instructables that you followed, isn't that right?
Yeah, if you were wondering whether I got this at some glamorous high-end boutique, the answer is no, but I'm going to show you in a moment how I made it.
Perfect. And for those who haven't voted yet, the overview is just, we want to know how helpful is this webinar for you? And then the second question is just how long have you been teaching with Tinkercad, so we can better develop webinars and content that's relevant for you. All right, I'll give it 5 more seconds for the rest of the responses to roll in. Perfect.
Thank you, Daria. And I think that was pretty awesome. The poll worked first time we tried it. And we love hearing from you. And also one of our upcoming questions too in this webinar is please let us know what other content might be useful for us to be able to base other future Tinkercad, Teaching with Tinkercad webinars on. So just a few more events that we want to tell you about. Upcoming in the month of April, conveniently in 2021, which is the year that we're in now, is National Robotics Week. So from April 3rd to April 11th, we're going to be actually debuting, I think, at least one new Tinkercad lesson plan that's inspired by robotics concepts. And also we have a collection of Instructables that are inspired by robotics that we're going to be sharing too with teachers. So please look out for those for National Robotics Week. Also just wanted to make you aware of an opportunity for students to win fun prizes. So we still have this contest going as part of the Make It Real program. So the challenge for this month is, can your students design an accessible, sustainable gym using Tinkercad? This is inspired by the story of football star James Devlin. The deadline is April 1st, so there's still time. And most of the students are using Tinkercad to create their designs, so no experience necessary. Please show us your creative ideas for accessible, sustainable gym designs. Also, I feel like we have our act together in telling you that the next webinar is Thursday, April 29th. I'm proud of that. I feel like Daria has helped us with that as well, so thank you, Daria. The next Teaching with Tinkercad webinar is going to be on the topic of Arduino. And also teachers have been telling us in previous webinars that they're really excited about the new microbit sub-environment within the circuits environment in Tinkercad. So we have a wonderful educator, Dory Friedman, who's going to be joining us to talk about how she's been introducing microbit to students through Tinkercad. We're very excited about it, clearly. And Daria's getting her hat on too. I just also wanted to again celebrate, because we are celebrating tonight, Nettrice. I'm so excited for her that we can now call her author as well. So her book is being published in August. You can pre-order it on Amazon as well. So not only is she going to be an author published by MIT, her artwork is also being featured by the Smithsonian as part of their birthday celebration. So for their 175th anniversary, they're doing, one way that they're celebrating is through an art show called Futures. And you can actually see, even in their rendering, you can see Nettrice's art in there. So we are so happy for Nettrice. We are very excited for all the work that she's doing and her friendship with the Smithsonian. You all know that Smithsonian is one of our friends within Tinkercad as well. So congratulations, Nettrice.
Thank you.
I'm so happy for you. I can't wait until we can have real 3D hangouts, but we'll do that soon. So also, if you were wondering about my glamorous hat tonight, I did not buy it at a fancy boutique. I actually made it through this Instructable, and I'm actually not very good at folding paper. and I found Elena's Instructables on making 8 simple paper hats really useful in building my confidence in my ability to make a paper hat. So I went with the Peter Pan style, but there's many styles to choose from. And they're actually fun, some Tinkercad extensions that she included too. So this is also through Instructables. So do please stay connected with us. The next 10 years of Tinkercad are powered by our inspiration from you as a community. So there are many ways to connect with us and to stay connected if you're already connected. This slideshow is going to be sent out to you with links for how to access all these different ways of connecting with us. If you want to email us, you can email us at tinkercadlearning@autodesk.com. Also, you can catch up on previous episodes. So if you go to the Tinkercad YouTube channel, there's a playlist with the Tinkercad teachers webinar series, so you can see all 4 episodes, as well as some older ones, some oldies but goodies from years previous. We also just want to thank you and celebrate you. The best way we can do that right now is to offer you a certificate that you will be emailed after this webinar. So this is just, if you're using this as part of your professional development or your evaluation, this is just to certify that you participated in this webinar for an hour with us. So thank you for that. So again, please do let us know what topics you would like for us to cover in an upcoming webinar. What would be more useful or more helpful to you? So do please let us know that. And also you can start asking questions in the question and answer. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm so excited to see everyone's hats. So it's hat time. Yay.
There is a question, Kellyanne, in the.
Yep.
Sure. So Jenny, you want to start the questions?
Sure. We have one question for Dr. Gaskins, and that is, do you find that it's helpful to teach some fundamental skills to your students before diving into a design challenge? Or do you let them dive in and teach themselves? Or do you have a strategy off of that spectrum?
Yeah, I usually do a quick demo, especially if they're using some software or hardware. And then I, at some point, want them to sort of do it themselves. So once they're comfortable, they feel like they've been introduced to it, they have my, their supervision, like 3D printing or something like that, then I let them do that, and then they can teach other people. Usually there's a kid that loves the 3D printer who wants to teach it to everybody because they just love it. So I usually have those students that are kind of come up from that be the ones that kind of keep it going. So I can move on to some other things that people need to know, or just to supervise and help them sort of deal with whatever design challenges they have to do.
Okay, we have another question in the chat, or in the, in the chat. Do you have any experience with autistic children? I teach a group of 7th graders on the spectrum. I'd love to hear any instructional tools you might have for introducing this to them.
I've had, actually I had a class workshop that I did the original quilt code project with in Lithonia, Georgia, and they were on the spectrum or had IEPs. And so we did a multiple day workshop, which included a museum visit, but we did instead of using 3D objects, we used paper, and the symbols were on paper, and they remixed and did stuff on construction paper and layered things. So I did work with a group with that actual activity, original activity, which you'll see linked in the intro to the Instructable. I did that with students that are, and they were middle school students.
Mm-hmm. Here's another comment or a question. I love using Tinkercad with my students, but we do not have the ability to 3D print as of yet. What are some other options to share their designs? No iPads either.
There's also a classroom option. When I'm teaching Tinkercad, I can set up a classroom so students can come right into Tinkercad, but during the gallery walk, we can share out their designs, or they can share out their designs just by sharing their screen, or I'll share their design from inside of Tinkercad. So a gallery walk is really cool because it allows them to see their work. And sometimes I have, if they're in the classroom, they can move around and see different laptops open or computer screens open, and even make comments. So it's a really good way to get them to move and to talk to each other.
I would also say it's sometimes kind of nice not to start out with modeling to print, because then there becomes an expectation from the students that everything I model needs to become printed. So it's kind of nice sometimes to just have that. We're just going to start to make things to make them and not necessarily to print.
Yeah, I once worked with a group of students too in Boston where the students actually designed inclusive play spaces, and then we happened to visit a construction company that had a VR cave and VR equipment, and they were able to put all the students' designs in the same VR build, and the kids could pass around the VR glasses and walk around and explore each other's designs too. I would say screen recording is also a fun way. So students, similar to what you saw Mr. Morrill do, you could have students do as well. So they could do a fun like screen recording tour of whatever it is that they've designed, and they could even record themselves voicing it over and make it into a video.
Not seeing any other additional questions. I did want to pass along that a lot of people are offering their congratulations to Dr. Gaskins for your new book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the chat, there is one.
Put it on the screen.
I'm very new to Tinkercad and I have a very basic question. How do I change the settings from private to public?
I'll answer that. And I know that this has been a stumbling block for some. You can set all designs that are created are by default private, so only you can see them. Or if you're in a classroom, your teacher can see them in your dashboard. If you're in a class, it puts you in what's called safe mode. And safe mode is sort of a safe way that your students can be online in Tinkercad and not being distracted by external comments or making things public and other external distractions. So what happens now is sometimes the teacher joins their own class, which puts them into safe mode. So while you're in safe mode, you can't change something to be public. And that's, so if you don't see that option, that means you're in safe mode. And the way you can fix that is log into your account on Tinkercad and go to your dashboard. And you'll see a thing that says my classes. And those are the classes that you may have inadvertently joined. If you remove yourself from that class, then you'll be out of safe mode. It's not the same as, it's not the same as the classrooms page where you're administering your classes. But if you look into your classes on your dashboard, just under where you see the circuits, code blocks, 3D designs listed there, you'll see if you're in your class and you can remove yourself there.
And if you yourself actually had one of my first Tinkercad designs ever featured, which was so exciting and probably the least featured worthy design ever. But if you want to do it yourself, when you go into your dashboard, you just kind of see the tiles, like the images of your designs. You just click on the tile and then it'll bring you up options that you can toggle off public or private. So teachers, please, aspire to be famous in the Tinkercad gallery as well. It's very exciting.
I'm not seeing any new questions.
Donald, Matthew, anything in the chat questions?
No.
I'll put a link to the explanation of safe mode. So there's more information there. I put it in the chat.
Sweet. Well, we know that it's, I know when I was a teacher post April vacation, which is coming up next month, that, sometimes it's hard to stay inspired and continue with professional development throughout the year. So we are really just happy that you all joined us tonight, that you're keeping the creativity going, and you're really thinking about, what are all the access points and what are all the entry points to getting students excited about STEAM and STEM and being creative. Daria just lost her hat. So we thank you for joining us tonight. And you will be getting an email with the recording and also with other resources like the slideshow and all the links and everything. Before we go, I just want to thank Dr. Nettrice Gaskins again. You are an inspiration and we look forward to continuing to be inspired by you. And I'm so excited to read your book when it comes out. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yay. All right, well, take care, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Right.